Hello everyone. Today we will start with the new chapter that is building, paintings and books. This chapter focuses on the different forms of art, architecture and written records that have been a part of India's history, particularly during ancient and medieval times. Now the first one is metallurgy. This passage focuses on the significant contribution of ancient Indian metallurgists to the field of metallurgy, specifically highlighting the Harappan civilization and the transition from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age in ancient India. Metallurgy has been one of the most remarkable achievements of ancient India, shaping not just our history but also influencing global advancement. Did you know that the Iron Pillar of Delhi, which has resisted rust for over 1600 years, is a marvel of ancient Indian metallurgy? Our journey begins with the Harappan civilization, where people were expert metallurgists. Archaeological findings from sites like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro reveal that they extensively used copper metallurgy. They even crafted bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, to make tools, weapons, and sculptures. They weren't just skilled at mining and smelting, they also had advanced technique for casting and shaping metals. This mastery of bronze placed the Harappan firmly in the Bronze Age. For example, the famous dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, a stunning bronze statue, was made using the lost wax casting technique, showcasing their metallurgical expertise. As time progressed, the Vedic period, which was around 1500 to 600 BCE, witnessed a significant shift, the transition to the Iron Age. Around 1200 BCE, iron objects began appearing in northern India, particularly in the Ganga Yamuna Doab region. This period saw the emergence of forged iron tools, which were stronger and more durable than bronze. India did not just stop at using iron, we perfected it. Our metallurgists developed three key types of iron. The first one is forged iron, which is strong and malleable, and that is used for making weapons. And another one is wrought iron, which is resistant to corrosion. It is used in construction and tools. Now, the third one is cast iron. Cast iron is used for making structures and industrial tools. Ancient Indian metalworking techniques influenced region as far as Rome, China, and the Middle East. Indian steel, known as the Woods steel, was highly prized and later became the foundation for the famous Damascus steel sword. The Iron Pillar at Mehrauli, Delhi, is a stunning example of ancient Indian metallurgical expertise, standing 7.2 meters high and weighing over 3 tons. It was built about 1500 years ago during the Gupta dynasty. This information comes from an inscription on the pillar, which mentions a ruler named Chandra, believed to be Chandragupta II. The most fascinating features of the iron pillar is that it has not rusted despite being exposed to weather conditions for centuries. This is because ancient Indian blacksmiths used iron with a high phosphorus concentration, which prevents rusting. Unlike modern iron, the pillar lacks sulfur and magnesium, reducing its vulnerability to corrosion. Another reason is formation of thin iron oxide layer, which has shielded the pillar from rusting. This pillar remains a symbol of India's advanced knowledge in metallurgy, showing that Indian craftsmen had mastered iron processing technique far ahead of their time. The architectural skill of ancient Indian craftsmen are evident in the remarkable structure they built, including stupas. A stupa, this is an example of stup. This is the great stupa and at Sanchi, Madhya Pradesh. A stupa is a mound-like structure that holds religious significance in Buddhism. These structures were built in different shapes and sizes, round, tall, big and small, but they shared common feature. Let's briefly discuss the structure of stupa. At the heart of the stupa, there is a small box containing bodily remains of Buddha or his followers, like teeth, bones, and ashes, and objects they use, precious items like stone and coins. A circular pathway was built around the stupa for devotional walking, that is pradakshina. devotees walked around the stupa. They walked around the stupa as a mark of respect. The path was surrounded by railings, and like you can see, it had gateways for entry. Another was gateway. These gateways were often richly decorated with intricate carvings depicting Buddha's stories, Jataka tales, and the symbols of Buddha. One of the most famous stupa of ancient India was located in Amravati, which is in Andhra Pradesh. It was built around 2000 years ago. It was magnificent in scale. The stupa was adorned with exquisite stone carvings showcasing Buddhist themes. Today, many of these carvings are preserved in museum, while the original stupa has mostly disappeared over time. Some of the earliest Hindu temples were built during this period, serving as the center of religious worship and devotion. These temples were dedicated to deities such as Vishnu, Shiva, and Durga, who were worshipped in beautifully constructed shrines. Let's explore key features of early Hindu temples. The first one is Garbhagriha, which is Sanctum Sanctorum. This was the most important room in the temple. It housed the image or idol of the chief deity. Priests performed religious rituals here, and devotees came to offer their prayers. Now the next one is Shikhar. Shikhar is this part is Shikhar. A shikhar was built above the Garbhagriha to mark the temple as a sacred site. These towers required careful planning and architectural precision. Now, example is the temple at Bhitargaon, which is in Uttar Pradesh, is one of the earliest example of a brick temple with a shikhar. Now, third is Mandap. Mandap is assembly hall. This was a large hall where devotees could gather for prayers and religious discussion. It serves as a place for community activities and ceremonies. Now, what is the significance of early temples? These temples were not just places of worship, but also centers of cultural, social, and artistic expression. The architectural brilliance of these early temples laid the foundation for the grand temple structure seen in later periods, such as those in Khajuraho, Konark, and Brihadeshwar. The monolithic temple of Mahabalipuram, this is built during the Pallava period, are remarkable example of rock cut architecture. Unlike brick temples which were built layer by layer from the bottom up, these temples were carved from a single massive rock, requiring artisans to work from the top down. Let's see what were the challenges faced by the artisans. Unlike brick structure where errors could be corrected by adding or replacing bricks, monolithic carvings required extreme precision. Any mistake could ruin the entire structure, as the stone could not be replaced or reshaped easily. The temples were carved from granite, a very hard stone. Cutting and shaping granite using ancient tools like chisels and hammers was a slow and labor intensive process. Without modern engineering tools, and the artisan had to judge the weight and balance of the structure carefully. Any miscalculation could lead to cracks or instability in the final temple. Unlike today's advanced machinery, stone cutters relied on basic chisels, hammers, and iron tools, which made the process slow and required immense skill and patience. Despite these challenges, the artisans of Mahabalipuram created stunning monolithic temples such as Pancharathas and the Descent of Ganga relief or Arjunan's penance, which continue to stand as a testament to their engineering and artistic brilliance. These structures remain an important part of India's architectural heritage. Since building a stupa or temple was an expensive project, it was often funded by royalty or rich merchants. The location was chosen carefully, often in a sacred or important area. Good quality stone such as granite, sandstone, or marble was identified and quarried from distant site. Transporting massive stone block was challenging, and it was done using elephant, cart, and wooden rollers. Each pieces had to be precisely positioned to form the structure. The pillars, the walls, and ceilings were carefully fitted together without modern cement, using interlocking technique and stone joints. Now let's learn about the painting. Nestled in the hills of Maharashtra, the Ajanta caves stand as a remarkable testament to the artistic and architectural brilliance of ancient India. These breathtaking rock-cut caves, dating back over 15,000 years, they are adorned with intricate paintings and sculptures that continue to captivate historians and art lovers alike. But what makes them so special? Let's uncover their secrets. The Ajanta caves were not just ordinary dwellings, they were built as monasteries and prayer halls for Buddhist monks. Carved into a rugged basalt cliffs, these caves provide a serene space for meditation, learning, and worship. Over time, artists and sculptors transformed them into spectacular work of religious devotion. Unlike other ancient structures that were built from bricks and stone blocks, the Ajanta caves were carved directly into the rock, a process that required immense skill, patience, and precision. Inside these caves are adorned with mesmerizing paintings that depict scenes from the Jatak tales, which narrate the previous lives of Buddha. But imagine this, the caves are completely dark inside. So, how did the artist work? Well, they relied mostly on the soft glow of torches and oil lamps to create the masterpieces. Even in such challenging conditions, their brushwork and detailing remains unmatched. One of the most astonishing aspects of Ajanta's painting is their remarkable vibrancy. Even after centuries, this longevity is due to the use of natural pigments derived from minerals and plants. But here is the mystery. Who are these incredible artists? Unlike modern times, where creator received recognition, these painters and sculptors left behind no signatures. Their art was considered a spiritual offering, a tribute to Buddha and the Buddhist way of life. While their names may be lost to history, their legacy endures through their breathtaking works. The Ajanta caves are more than just a relic of the past. They are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, drawing visitors and scholars from around the world. They serve as a window into India's artistic heritage and a reminder of the ingenuity of ancient craftsmen. Now, the next topic is the word of books. Throughout history, literature has been a powerful medium to tell stories of heroism, love, betrayal, and justice. Among the most celebrated works of ancient Indian literature are the Tamil epics, narrative that have stood the test of time, continue to inspire generation. Today we will delve into the two great epics, which is Silpadikaram and Mani Mekkalai. One of the most famous Tamil epics from this period is Silpadikaram, written around 1800 years ago by the poet Adigal. The story follows Kovalan, who is a merchant from Puhar, who falls in love with the Madhvi, a courtesan, neglecting his wife Kannagi. Eventually, he realizes his mistake and returns to Kannagi, leaving Puhar and traveling to Madurai to start anew. But fate has other plans. In Madurai, Kovalan is falsely accused of theft by the king's jeweler and is sentenced to death without a fair trial. Devastated by her husband's unjust execution, Kannagi unleashes her wrath, proving his innocence and destroying the city of Madurai in a fiery act of divine justice. The emotional depth of Silpadikram is beautifully captured in Kannagi's heart-wrenching lament. She cried out, "Is there no God? Is there no God in this country? Can there be a God in land where the sword of the king is used for the murder of innocent strangers?" These words expresses her anger, sorrow, and a powerful demand for justice, making her one of the most revered characters in Tamil literature. But the story does not end there. Sattanar, another Tamil poet, wrote Mani Mekkalai, a sequel to Silpadikram, about Mani Mekkalai, the daughter of Kovalan and Madhvi. Unlike her mother, Mani Mekkalai chooses the path of renunciation and she becomes a Buddhist nun. For centuries, these epics were lost, their manuscript hidden from the world. It was only about 100 years ago that they were rediscovered, allowing scholars and readers to reconnect with the incredible literary heritage. Moving on to another topic, that is recording and preserving old stories, which is recording and preserving old stories. This passage highlights the rich literary tradition of ancient India, focusing on poetry, epics, and religious texts that have influenced generations. Kalidas' poem Meghdut, that is Cloud Messenger, is a classic example of nature poetry. In this verse, a mountain cloud is imagined as a messenger carrying the word of a lover to his beloved. Kalidas' description of the breeze, rich with the scent of the earth and the touch of the raindrops, reflects his deep appreciation for nature. His poetry often blends human emotions with the natural world, making him one of the India's greatest poets. Around the same time, Hindu religious stories that had been passed down orally were written down in Sanskrit as the Puranas. These texts contain myths about gods like Vishnu, Shiva, and Durga, as well as details on rituals and worship. Unlike the Vedas, which were restricted to the upper caste, the Puranas were written in simple Sanskrit verse so that everyone, including women and lower caste, could listen to them. These stories were often recited in temples, making them accessible to a broad audience. Two of the most famous ancient Indian texts are Mahabharata and Ramayana. Though their story had existed for centuries, they were written down around 1500 years ago. Mahabharata narrates a great war between two groups of cousins, the Kauravas and Pandavas, over the throne of Hastinapur. It is a complex tale of power, righteousness, and destiny. The Bhagavad Gita is a sacred philosophical text, is part of this epic, where Krishna imparts wisdom to Arjuna before battle. Next one is Ramayana. It is attributed to Valmiki, who follows Ram, the prince of Ayodhya, who is exiled and later fights the demon king Ravan to rescue his wife Sita. It is a tale of duty, devotion, and justice, highlighting the ideal characteristic of a king and a husband. These ancient stories are more than just historical literature. They continue to shape Indian culture, traditions, and values. Even today, the Ramayana and Mahabharata are performed in theatre, festival, and television adaptation, keeping them alive across generations. Similarly, Kalidasa's poetry remains admired for its deep connection with nature and human emotion. Ordinary people in ancient India contributed to storytelling through poems, songs, dance, and plays. Many of these stories were later collected in texts like the Jataka tales and Panchatantra, which conveyed important moral lessons. Jataka stories, in particular, were linked to Buddhism and often depicted previous lives of Buddha. These stories were not just written down but also illustrated on stupas and paintings, making them accessible to all, even those who could not read. One such story is given here. This story was carved into a sculpture at Barhat, an important Buddhist site in central India. Please read the story and try to answer the given question. Now the next topic is writing book on science. Aryabhata's major work, the Aryabhatiam, presented some groundbreaking ideas about the nature of the universe and mathematics. He suggested that the earth rotates on its axis, causing day and night. This was a magnificent step in understanding the motion of celestial bodies, long before this idea became widely accepted in the West. He also provided an early explanation of eclipses, explaining them as the result of the shadow of the earth falling on the moon for lunar eclipse, and the moon coming between the earth and the sun for the solar eclipse. Aryabhatta also made significant advancement in geometry. He gave a remarkably accurate approximation of pi, stating that the circumference of circle is about 3.1416 times the diameter, which is extremely close to the value used in modern mathematics. Brahmagupta is known for his contribution to algebra and astronomy. His work Brahma Sphuta Siddhanta provided rules for arithmetic operation involving zero and negative numbers. He was the first to treat zero as a number in its own right, provided formulas for solving quadratic equation. His ideas laid the groundwork for many aspects of modern mathematics. Now the Bhaskaracharya. He was often known as the Bhaskara II, made several advances in algebra, calculus, and number theory. His book Lilavati is considered a classic of mathematics literature. His work on solving equation and also developed early concept of differential calculus, predating a work of European mathematician by many centuries. Together, these scientists and mathematicians laid the foundation for much of the modern understanding of mathematics and astronomy, and their contributions were influential not just in India but in shaping global scientific thought. Bhaskaracharya, often known as Bhaskara II, made several advances in algebra, calculus, and number theory. His book Lilavati is considered a classic of mathematical literature. He worked on solving equations and also developed early concepts of differential calculus, predating the work of European mathematicians by many centuries. Together, these scientists and mathematicians laid the foundation for much of the modern understanding of mathematics and astronomy, and their contributions were influential not just in India but in shaping global scientific thought. Let's see what was happening elsewhere around this time. The paper was invented in China around this time by a court official named Kai Lun during the Han Dynasty. He made it by mixing mulberry bark, hemp, old cloth, and fish nets into a pulp, pressing and drying it into thin sheets. This invention gradually spread to the Arab world after the Battle of Talas and later to Europe, where it eventually replaced parchment and became widely used for writing and printing. Now, one question is given here: what were manuscripts in early India made out of? Now, we have already discussed this question in chapter 1 in very elaborate manner. Kindly go through that video to find out the answer of this question. Now, let's start with exercise. Let's recall. Now, in this first exercise is match the following. First is stupa. As you know, stupa is mount. Shikhar is tower. Mandapa is place in temple where people could assemble. Third is Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha is the place where the image of deity is installed. Last is Pradakshina Path. Pradakshina Path is circular path around the stupa. Now the next is fill in the blanks. Now first is who was a great astronomer. As you know, Aryabhatta was a great astronomer. Now the next one is a story about gods and goddesses are found in the epics. Now third is Valmiki is recognized as the author of the Sanskrit Ramayana. As you know, the two famous Tamil epics are Shilpadikaram and Mani Mikkalai. Next is let's discuss. I think you should try to attempt these exercises. The real magic happens when you do the exercises at the end of each chapter. Why? Because those exercises train your brain exactly like the UPSC wants to think clearly, write precisely, and connect facts smartly. One very interesting question which is given here: list some steps that can be taken to make building and monuments accessible to differently abled people. Now I will discuss this. Imagine visiting a historic monument, but because there is a long staircase and no ramp, you can't enter. For millions of differently abled people, this is a daily reality. As future administrator, you must ensure that public spaces are truly inclusive for everyone. Now, there are some steps which we can take to make the buildings and monuments accessible to differently able people. Could be construct ramps and gentle slopes beside stairs, install elevators and lift with accessible controls, create a smooth obstacle-free pathway with tactile paving for the visually impaired. Tactile paving means textured surface. Provide accessible toilets with handrails and wider doors. Set up clear signage in large fonts, braille, and auditory format. Add handrails and guardrails along stairs and corridors, and make lower ticket counter and help desk for easy reach. Now, accessibility is not charity, it is a right. When we design spaces for everyone, we create a society that respects dignity and equality. As future officers, your policy can open up monuments, parks, schools, and offices for everyone, not just for a few. Now, I realize that this question is important and worth discussing, so I have shared my points on it. You are welcome to think of more solution as well. With this, we have completed the book. Next, we will begin the class 7 NCRT. Thank you.